The history of Zelda portable titles has been a bit hit or miss. While Oracle of Seasons and Ages for the original Game Boy Color and the Minish Cap for Game Boy Advance were in the same vein as their predecessors, they brought fun, interesting, compelling, and most importantly memorable new characters and mechanics to the table. On the other hand, the DS entries Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks were ultimately acceptable, but tedious titles that didn't do much to add to the Zelda legacy. Let's find out which category Link's newest adventure falls into. I'm Mark Bursteiner, and this is The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds. A Link Between Worlds looks and sounds fantastic. Everything is exactly where you left it. Both Hyrule and the Dark World, which is now known as Lorule, are identical in layout, with a few key changes with regard to access and traversal in terms of different areas here and there. Fast travel is also thankfully present in both Hyrule and Lorule. The soundtrack and the sound design are both absolutely phenomenal. They're updated and polished versions of every single tune, jingle, and sound that you remember from A Link to the Past. And they are all present and accounted for, and they all sound fantastic. The flagship feature of the game, which is merging into a 2D painting on a wall, causes the audio to actually flatten into a mono-sounding version, which is immensely immersive. This is the very first time I've played a 3DS game that I really feel you have to play in 3D. If you're playing this on the 2DS, yes, you're gonna get the gameplay, yes, you're gonna get to play it, but the real full experience comes from getting that feel of verticality. It's really, really fantastic. They really seem to have put a lot of thought into it. There are these subtle lighting changes moving from floor to floor that really make you feel like you're going up and down. The way that the floor and ceilings just fade away as you move up and down floors, and a lot of these dungeons are designed to take advantage of that feeling. A lot of them are really high and really, really deep. They really set the bar high in this game for other 3DS titles to make much better use of what, at the end of the day, is a device's namesake feature. Given that this is a Zelda title, the gameplay here is absolutely the star, and the gameplay is exactly what you would expect from a Zelda title, which isn't a slight against it in the least. It's fantastic. The puzzles are mostly gratifying, with quite a few head scratchers. There's a handful of times that I was actually stumped and really had to put a lot of thought and actually took a while to get through a particular room or a particular dungeon. They do a really, really good job for the most part of not holding your hand too much. While there are instances of it, for the most part, while you're in a dungeon, the game is just kind of nudging you in the right direction and expecting you to kind of figure it out. It's definitely not nearly as obnoxious as Navi or Fi from Skyward Sword. And the puzzles really do ask you to think creatively, and most of them really do feel rewarding once you figure out what you're supposed to do. It's really, really nice, and a lot of those puzzles will actually stick with me. There's one item in particular, a new item, that I think was a lot of fun to use, and that was easily my favorite one in the game. Speaking of the items, A Link Between Worlds does something brand new. They have a brand new paradigm for the items, and I think it works pretty well, but I do think that there's a little bit of room for improvement. Almost immediately in the game, right from the outset, you're given the option to rent just about all the items that you might see later in the game, with the caveat that if you die, if you fall in battle, you will have to re-rent all of them for the same price that you rented them in the first place. So obviously then it does cost money, but it's a little bit weird because it doesn't actually weigh on you at all because there's so much money in the game. There's just so many rupees that it's not super difficult even if you were to die to head back and rent everything all over again. So it's never really an issue, and especially with so many save points, it's just not something that you're really gonna face too often. I also really enjoyed the item upgrade system, which has you searching for a bunch of little lost Malamai, little items. They're not items, they're little creatures, that once you collect 10 of them, for every 10 you can upgrade one of your items. I thought this was actually really fun. You get one more powerful item early in the game, and then when it's time to use that item, it really does give you quite a big advantage. Those upgrades are not silly little, just like, ooh, a little bit more power here and there. They're really good, and I thought that the upgraded versions of the items were really cool and really fun. I did have a little bit of a problem with the lack of depth in the game. Despite Link growing into a character with personality throughout most of the franchise's more recent titles, including Skyward Sword, A Link Between Worlds stays a little bit too true to its roots when it comes to the characters and the story. The same kind of flat quest that Link is presented with in A Link to the Past aren't quite up to par with the emotionally compelling storylines of the franchise's console counterparts. So without compelling villains or a driving force behind the damsel/kingdom in distress formula, I found myself just kind of rushing to get to the next dungeon because I wanted to get to a next dungeon. I wasn't super interested in why it was happening, and then at the end, it felt a little bit stunted because of that. I felt that there were two major puzzles that I found myself incredibly frustrated with. And I found, once I figured them out, that the issue was more game design than it did come down to user error. Most of the puzzles, like I mentioned earlier, are actually really good, really tough but rewarding, and they ask you to think outside of the box, but these felt more like a cop-out, and it does seem like they boil down to poor game design rather than me not being able to figure them out. So once I did figure them out, I felt a little bit silly about them. While most of the game didn't feel like it was holding my hand, I did think that there were just a handful of times where I think the game got a little bit too easy, where they could have ratcheted up the difficulty. Item pickups, like I said about the rupees, there's just so much money. You are never looking for money. So many chests with rupees in them, so many 20 rupees dropped by enemies all the time. So when it comes to, whether dying because of the rental or you're spending money on a game or whatever it may be, you're just never hurting for money. And then you're also never looking for hearts either. I very rarely found myself without most of my life. And I ended up with a plethora of these potion ingredients, which I hardly ever used. I only ended up dying in the game once at the final battle, and I think that's just because I just was getting a little bit too gung-ho and just plowed right in there. And it also makes a few missteps here and there where I don't think other Zelda titles might have. There are parts in the game where you literally walk up to a dungeon and the correct item to use is plastered right there, right in front of the dungeon, almost completely defeating the purpose of having access to all the items from the onset. So that was a little bit offensive to me. Just walking up to a dungeon and seeing a huge bow and arrow right out in front of it seems a little bit silly and counterintuitive when it looks like you're trying to shake up the paradigm of the game. Characterizing A Link Between Worlds as a love letter to fans of A Link to the Past is a bit of a double-edged sword. It feels like a move in the right direction for portable Zelda adventures, yes. Its lack of a compelling storyline and memorable moments or items wasn't really enough to keep me from enjoying the game, but it does leave me expecting more from the next title. I do find myself wishing that A Link Between Worlds were to Zelda as X and Y were to Pokemon, adding fresh new concepts and completely revitalizing the franchise in the process, but it does fall a bit short of that mark. All that said though, I immensely enjoyed this game and I'm really looking forward to replaying in Hero Mode, which offers decreased item drops and increased enemy difficulty. Ultimately, A Link Between Worlds offers a really fun and rich experience for veterans and for newcomers alike. While the story lacks depth, the changes to the item system really do excite me. The Zelda team at Nintendo is obviously not afraid to take risks, and that makes me really confident in the future of one of my absolute favorite, most beloved franchises of all time. It's an absolute must-play for fans of the series and a very strongly recommended pickup for just about everyone else.
Hey guys, thanks a lot so much for watching this video. I very much appreciate you taking the time. Just wanted to take another couple of seconds and thank YouTube user Tetra Ninja, whose Let's Play video footage we used for this review. You can go ahead and check him out over on YouTube. He does all kinds of Let's Plays, console, portable, all kinds of stuff. Really cool dude, really cool YouTube user with some really cool videos, so definitely go ahead and check him out. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, comments, dumb things you want to say to me, let me know in the comments on YouTube. Otherwise, I'm looking forward to doing some more reviews again very soon. So your feedback would be super appreciated, or not so appreciated, whatever. See ya.